The palace was unusually quiet that morning, the grand halls echoing only faintly with the footsteps of early staff. Sunlight spilled through the towering windows, catching on polished floors and gilded surfaces. But even the golden light could not dispel the sense of tension that hung invisibly in the air. Guard Lieutenant Rowan Hale made his morning rounds, his posture impeccable, boots tapping with controlled rhythm against marble. 17 years of service had trained him to move through these corridors almost invisibly, to blend duty with observation, to see more than the casual eye could ever detect. Yet even he sensed that the palace had become restless overnight, as if aware of a secret it had long protected finally stirring beneath its surface. Rowan paused at the corner of the east wing, the tapestries here older, depicting historic monarchs whose painted gazes seemed to follow his every step. He traced the familiar route to the queen consort's private wing, noting the usual details, the subtle alignment of candlesticks on a side table, the faint scent of lavender from the previous evening's cleaning, the polished bronze handles of doors that had seen centuries of secrets. Everything was orderly, pristine, unremarkable, but for the faintest trace of disturbance he could feel in the very air. Something had changed. The palace had shifted, subtly, imperceptibly, yet unmistakably, and Rowan's instincts were alert. The hidden vault had been a legend whispered among palace staff for decades. Stories of Queen Elizabeth's secret safes, of treasures tucked away beneath ceremonial chambers, had long circulated as half-truths, half-fantasy. But rumors persisted that Queen Camilla, ever protective of her influence and authority, had inherited a means of safeguarding her own collection. Hidden from prying eyes, even from the king himself, no guard had ever been allowed access or even knowledge of its location. Yet today, as Rowan made his routine inspection of the queen consort's wing, a subtle irregularity caught his attention. A barely perceptible seam along the floor of a seldom-used corridor, so expertly concealed that only a trained eye would notice it. His breath hitched slightly. He had found it. Rowan knelt, running a gloved hand along the seam, feeling for any imperfection. The metal edge beneath the wood, cold to the touch, was unlike the usual flooring. The slightest depression suggested a latch mechanism. His pulse quickened. This was not ceremonial or decorative. It was a deliberate, concealed entrance. For a moment, he paused, weighing the enormity of the discovery. This could be the hidden vault rumored for years, the legendary chamber of crown jewels and treasures Camilla had kept secret. Rowan had seen priceless objects before, safeguarded them, carried ceremonial keys, but this was different. This was secrecy layered with power, authority, and perhaps audacity. He drew his breath, steadying himself. Rowan had a duty to report unusual findings immediately, yet caution demanded that he observe carefully before acting. One misstep could alert palace staff or, worse, the queen consort herself. He had to confirm the presence of the vault, understand its mechanism, and only then decide how to proceed. His gloved fingers traced the seam, probing gently. A soft click responded to a hidden latch, and a panel shifted slightly under his touch. Rowan's eyes widened. The vault door, hidden with impeccable precision, had revealed itself. Rowan straightened, examining the panel and the faint outline of a keyhole. He could almost feel the weight of history pressing against him. Generations of royal secrets, of jewels and treasures, lay just beyond this threshold. The palace, always majestic and imposing, seemed to lean toward him, silent and expectant. Rowan's training flared into acute awareness. He knew the risk of exposure. He knew the responsibility inherent in such a discovery, and he knew that the consequences, should anyone, especially the king, learn of it prematurely, could be immediate and profound. Footsteps approached. Rowan's body tensed. The corridor remained otherwise empty, but he sensed the subtle shift of shadows, the quiet resonance of movement too deliberate to be accidental. He crouched slightly, keeping his presence hidden, and waited. The footsteps belonged to a junior aide, perhaps unaware of the vault, moving with purpose toward the queen consort's chambers. Rowan's gaze flicked back to the seam, the panel that concealed centuries of treasures. Every instinct screamed caution. Observation first, intervention later. He had to be certain before acting. The latch mechanism was intricate, almost ceremonial, and Rowan admired the craftsmanship even as he remained cautious. Whoever had designed this vault had anticipated discovery, yet ensured that it would remain nearly invisible without knowledge of its precise location. His gloved hand traced the edge again, testing for any sign of alarm systems, traps, or other security measures. Everything was silent, meticulous, deliberate. Rowan's pulse thrummed in rhythm with the distant ticking of a clock mounted in the grand hall, each beat reinforcing the sense of suspense. Finally, he reached for his communication device, only briefly, careful to avoid detection, and sent a coded alert to the senior guard in the adjacent wing. He could not act alone. The vault's discovery, while monumental, required measured caution. The king, once informed, would act immediately. Rowan felt the weight of responsibility tighten around him. The palace, for all its grandeur, had become a silent witness to a moment that could alter the balance of power, discretion, and trust within its walls. Rowan waited in shadow, glancing again at the seam in the panel. The light from the hallway fell across it, illuminating the precise lines, the faint engraving near the hidden keyhole that suggested care and intention. This was no ordinary storage room. This was a private vault, intended to preserve treasures from both time and prying eyes. Rowan's mind raced with possibilities. Priceless gems, ceremonial crowns, documents of historical significance, perhaps even items that could influence authority within the royal family. The corridor remained empty. Rowan's gloved hand hovered near the panel, aware that the vault itself was only the beginning. Discovering it was one thing. Understanding the implications was another. Every story he had heard and whispered rumors about Camilla's influence, her careful orchestration of authority and secrecy, now felt validated. Rowan felt both awe and apprehension. The queen consort had built this hidden chamber with precision, intelligence, and an unspoken audacity that few would dare challenge. A subtle vibration from the floor beneath him caused Rowan to pause. Someone was coming again, likely closer to the queen's chambers, unaware of his presence. He pressed himself fully into the shadows, breath steady, eyes fixed on the seam. The palace seemed to tighten around him, corridors echoing the quiet tension of secrecy. Rowan's training and experience guided him. Concealment first, observation second, action only when necessary. He understood that the vault's discovery, while monumental, had to be handled with the utmost care. Minutes stretched, each elongated by the weight of anticipation. Rowan cataloged every detail: the placement of candlesticks, the alignment of the carpets, the faint hum of distant heating systems, the polished brass handles of doors he had passed countless times. The palace, in its silent grandeur, seemed alive with expectation. Rowan's fingers brushed lightly against the panel again, testing its resistance, marveling at the craftsmanship, all while remaining acutely aware that any misstep could alert staff, or worse, the queen consort herself. Then, a soft but unmistakable sound of footsteps retreated down the corridor. Rowan exhaled quietly, the immediate tension easing slightly. He remained vigilant, aware that the discovery of the vault was only the first step. The palace, the queen consort, and the king's reaction would follow. Rowan understood the gravity. This hidden crown jewel vault, long rumored and expertly concealed, had been revealed to him first. Every instinct told him that the next hours would demand caution, judgment, and unwavering loyalty. He pressed lightly against the seam once more, confirming the latch, the panel, and the hidden compartment. This was no ordinary storage room. This was a hidden vault, a repository of treasures, influence, and secrecy. Rowan's eyes flicked toward the hallway, noting the absence of immediate observers. Before he drew a steadying breath, he would report the discovery, as protocol demanded, but carefully, ensuring that the vault remained secure until the king's response was both known and executed. The palace had remained silent and majestic for centuries, but today, with the hidden crown jewel vault revealed, it had become a stage for immediate consequence, moral reckoning, and the first stirrings of royal drama that would ripple far beyond its walls. Rowan Hale remained pressed against the shadowed corridor, his eyes fixed on the seam of the floor that concealed the queen consort's hidden vault. The morning sunlight, bright and warm against the grand windows of the east wing, contrasted sharply with the tension he felt coiling in his chest. The palace, usually a calm and predictable stage for ceremonial life, had become a theater of suspense, secrecy, and imminent revelation. Rowan's instincts, honed over nearly 2 decades of service, screamed that the discovery of the vault was only the first ripple in a wave that would reach the very apex of authority, the king himself. The first subtle disturbance came almost immediately. A soft shuffle of footsteps echoed from the direction of the grand staircase. Rowan's head snapped toward the sound. It was too light and careful to belong to senior palace staff or the king's aides, yet deliberate enough to suggest purpose. He remained crouched in the shadows, body coiled, senses sharpened to every flicker of movement. His eyes caught a flash of polished black shoes moving along the corridor's edge. The figure was small, likely one of the palace pages or a junior aide, carrying nothing that seemed unusual. Yet even this minor deviation set Rowan's instincts on high alert. The vault's discovery, while monumental, had to remain unseen until the appropriate moment. As the figure passed, Rowan noted the subtle quiver in their movements. They were nervous, aware perhaps of an unusual presence in the palace, but unaware of the secret he had just uncovered. He followed at a precise distance, maintaining a silent vigilance. Every creak of the polished floors, every faint echo from distant chambers, seemed amplified in the stillness. Rowan's mind catalogued the potential consequences. If the page were to notice the seam, the panel, or any clue to the vault's location, the queen consort's meticulously orchestrated secrecy could unravel instantly. Then another sound joined the tension. A whisper, almost lost in the vast expanse of the corridor. Rowan stiffened. It was deliberate, soft, and carried a trace of apprehension. From the shadowed corner of the hallway, he caught sight of Marianne Price, the young aide who had been involved in prior sensitive tasks. Her presence here, at this hour, suggested either extraordinary diligence or an unanticipated complication. Rowan's pulse quickened. Marianne's steps were hesitant, her movements cautious, as she adjusted the strap of a small satchel she carried. He knew instinctively that whatever she had brought was likely connected to the vault he had discovered, or, at the very least, to Camilla's hidden activities within the palace. Rowan advanced slightly, remaining cloaked in shadow, observing every detail. Marianne paused near a low side table, crouched briefly, and adjusted the contents of her satchel. Rowan's trained eye detected the subtle metallic gleam inside, evidence that she carried something of value, though he could not yet determine whether it was part of the queen consort's crown jewels or documentation regarding the vault itself. Every moment of hesitation, every subtle movement, was amplified in the tension-filled corridors. Rowan understood that the palace itself seemed to lean forward, aware of the delicate balance between discovery and concealment. A sudden creak from the polished floorboards above made Rowan freeze. He pressed himself further into the shadow, baton ready. The faint shuffle suggested another figure moving in the east wing, someone who should not be here at this hour. Rowan's mind raced. Was this another aide? A curious staff member drawn by faint rumors? Or someone more senior? Perhaps even a member of the royal family, unknowingly approaching a secret that Camilla had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. He held his breath, senses attuned, as the faint echo of footsteps drew closer. Marianne rose to leave the side table, adjusting the satchel against her chest. Her nervous glances up and down the corridor betrayed her awareness of the palace's ever-present eyes, even if none were actively watching. Rowan moved silently to position himself between her and the corridor entrance, prepared to shield her from inadvertent discovery. He knew that her inexperience, combined with the significance of what she carried, placed her in a vulnerable position. One misstep, one unexpected encounter, could unravel Camilla's hidden plans and potentially provoke a crisis far beyond the reach of ordinary palace protocol. As Marianne reached the far end of the corridor, Rowan noticed a faint glimmer of light from beneath a door. It was the antechamber adjacent to the queen consort's wing, typically used only for ceremonial preparation or storage. The light suggested either a staff member working unusually early or some mechanical inspection, yet Rowan's instincts warned him that it could be related to the vault. He pressed himself against the wall, listening carefully. The faint sound of whispered voices drifted from the door, carrying tones of urgency. Rowan caught fragments. "Ensure no one discovers. must remain hidden before the king. His pulse quickened. The queen consort's orders had always been carefully timed, precise, and secretive, but hearing them carried out in real time elevated the moral stakes. Rowan knew he faced a choice. Intervene to prevent possible mistakes, remain an observer, or risk exposure by confronting those unaware of the full implications of the secret. Every second stretched, magnifying the tension, and he realized with acute clarity that the palace's calm morning had become a stage for suspense, where loyalty, discretion, and courage would collide. Rowan's eyes followed Marianne as she paused, crouching briefly to adjust the satchel again, ensuring its contents remained concealed. He noted the subtle metallic shimmer, a glint that suggested treasures far beyond routine documents. The vault he had discovered earlier had clearly been accessed, or at least influenced, by the queen consort's aides, and Rowan's responsibility to preserve the secret had become immediate. The corridors seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if the palace itself recognized that the hidden crown jewel vault was no longer merely legend, but a present, tangible reality. The distant hum of activity began to grow, a subtle movement of staff in adjacent corridors, the faint clatter of trays or cleaning equipment, but nothing overt. Rowan remained vigilant. Every sound was amplified, every shadow potentially revealing, every step a possible trigger for exposure. He understood that Marianne's journey, though cautious, was fraught with risk. One unexpected observer, one misdirected glance, and the carefully maintained secrecy of Camilla's hidden vault could collapse in an instant. A sudden movement drew Rowan's attention to a darkened stairwell leading toward the king's private chambers. A figure descended slowly, deliberately, almost cautiously, carrying a lantern. Rowan's pulse surged. It was unlikely to be the king himself. Yet the presence of anyone in proximity to the vault, without prior knowledge, was a potential hazard. Rowan moved slightly, ensuring he remained unseen, and tracked the figure's progress with precise calculation. He recognized the tension in the body language, the cautious step, the lowered head, the almost imperceptible scan of the surroundings. Someone was searching, or perhaps responding to vague rumors. Marianne reached the junction of the corridors near the vault, glancing nervously behind her. Rowan remained in shadow, baton ready, observing. Her hesitation betrayed her awareness that she carried responsibility beyond her years, a moral and practical burden tied directly to Camilla's secrecy. The palace's polished floors seemed to echo her anxiety, every step magnified in the stillness. Rowan realized at this moment the subtle disturbance caused by staff, the potential for accidental exposure, was a prelude to the larger drama yet to come. Minutes stretched. Taut with suspense, Rowan cataloged every detail. The faint hum of distant activity, the slight shifts of light across the corridor, the subtle metallic sheen of the satchel, the cadence of footsteps that moved closer and farther away. Every element heightened the anticipation, amplified the stakes, and reinforced the truth that Camilla's hidden crown jewel vault was no longer simply a legend. It was now a present danger, a secret whose revelation could provoke immediate and far-reaching consequences. Finally, Rowan exhaled slightly, recognizing that Marianne's cautious maneuvering had successfully avoided any direct exposure. Yet the tension remained, palpable, and the palace, bathed in morning light yet alive with shadows, seemed to whisper that the king's reaction to the vault's discovery would be swift, decisive, and possibly irreversible. Rowan's senses remained primed, every instinct ready for the moment when secrecy collided with authority, and when the hidden crown jewel vault would demand not just observation, but action. Rowan Hale remained in the shadowed corridor, his eyes fixed on Marianne as she navigated toward the hidden vault. The morning light, now stronger and warmer, did little to ease the tension coiling in the east wing. Every echo of footsteps, every subtle creak of the polished floorboards resonated with amplified significance. Rowan's instincts told him that the moment of confrontation was approaching, that the king's reaction to the discovery would arrive swiftly, unbidden, and with authority that brooked no delay. He felt the weight of history pressing on him. This was not mere protocol, nor ceremonial routine. The hidden crown jewel vault represented decades of secrecy, influence, and, if mishandled, scandal. Marianne paused briefly at the pedestal that concealed the satchel, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted its placement. Rowan watched from the shadows, noting the subtle metallic glimmer beneath the fabric. Whatever treasures or documents rested inside were significant, perhaps priceless, and the care with which she handled them spoke volumes about the weight of her responsibility. Rowan's mind catalogued every detail: the sound of her soft inhalations, the slight quiver in her shoulders, the precise adjustment of her steps to avoid any creak. One misstep could reveal the vault prematurely, disrupt Camilla's meticulously maintained secrecy, and provoke a confrontation with consequences that would ripple far beyond the immediate hallway. A sudden, authoritative voice cut through the corridor. "Rowan, report immediately." The words were sharp, precise, and unmistakable. The king himself had been informed of the discovery. Rowan's breath hitched slightly, a mix of anticipation and apprehension coursing through him. He straightened, stepping lightly from the shadows, ready to guide Marianne to safety while maintaining control over the situation. The palace, usually a silent observer of ceremonial precision, had shifted into the tense theater of immediate consequence. Rowan felt the familiar thrill of responsibility tighten around him, the kind that came only when duty intersected with moral judgment and potential scandal. The king appeared at the far end of the corridor, his expression unreadable, posture imposing. He had moved with purpose from the grand staircase, informed perhaps by senior aides or by the coded alert Rowan had sent earlier. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere, and Rowan instinctively positioned himself between Marianne and the monarch, ready to manage both observation and protection. The king's gaze swept the corridor with commanding authority, pausing briefly to take in the details of the shadowed walls, the glint of metal on the pedestal, and the subtle shift of light across the floor seam. Rowan knew that whatever followed would be decisive. "Lieutenant Hale," the king said, voice low but unmistakably firm. "Explain." The single word carried both command and expectation. Rowan stepped forward, keeping his movements precise and controlled. "Sire," he began, steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "During my routine inspection of the East Wing, I discovered a hidden panel along this corridor. It conceals a compartment which appears to be a vault, long unreported, containing items of considerable value. It is under my observation, secured, and no one else has been granted access." The king's eyes narrowed slightly. "And how long has this vault been concealed?" His tone was even, yet the undercurrent of surprise and authority was unmistakable. Rowan hesitated for only a fraction of a second before responding. "Sire, based on the construction and placement, it is likely this chamber has been concealed for years, possibly decades. Its existence was not documented in official records, to my knowledge." Rowan's words carried weight, carefully balancing honesty with discretion. He understood that the king's reaction could be immediate, and that any misstatement could provoke tension, scandal, or even disciplinary action against staff or aides. Marianne shifted slightly behind him, eyes wide, hands clutching the satchel. Rowan's instincts flared. She was inexperienced, loyal, and unprepared for the moral and procedural gravity of this moment. He moved subtly, placing a protective presence between her and the king, ensuring that her nervous energy did not inadvertently disrupt the carefully maintained secrecy. The palace, silent and grand, seemed to lean toward the moment, echoing the tension of centuries held in reserve. The king's gaze swept from Rowan to Marianne, and for a heartbeat, the corridor seemed suspended in time. Then, without warning, he gestured toward the pedestal. "What is in that satchel?" His tone was even, but the authority behind it left no room for misdirection. Rowan understood instantly that the moral dilemma had intensified. He could reveal the contents, maintain secrecy for the queen consort's sake, or attempt a delicate balance that preserved both discretion and integrity. Every instinct screamed caution. Every principle of loyalty and duty demanded prudence. Rowan nodded subtly toward Marianne, signaling her to remain calm. Then, with deliberate care, he knelt slightly, gesturing toward the pedestal without touching it. "Sire," he said, voice steady, "the contents are secured and have not been disturbed. It is my understanding they are of personal significance to the queen consort, and I have maintained their protection." The king's eyes remained fixed on him, sharp and assessing, as though weighing Rowan's judgment against both protocol and moral responsibility. A brief silence followed, filled only by the faint hum of palace activity beyond the corridor and the distant ticking of a clock. Then the king stepped closer, inspecting the floor seam, the panel, the subtle metallic gleam that betrayed the vault's presence. So this has remained hidden from me, from the official record, from all of us, he said quietly. Yet each word carried authority and restrained surprise. Rowan nodded, understanding that the moment had now shifted from discovery to confrontation. Marianne's hands trembled slightly, and Rowan placed a gentle, protective hand near her elbow. She looked up at him, fear and uncertainty mingling in her eyes. Rowan's pulse thrummed in rhythm with the weight of the moment. The vault's existence, the queen consort's secrecy, and the king's immediate reaction had converged into a moral crucible, demanding judgment, discretion, and courage. Rowan knew that the next moments would define not only the integrity of the vault, but the trust and authority of all involved. The king gestured toward Rowan again. Lieutenant, ensure that no one outside this corridor is aware of this discovery until I have spoken with the queen consort. This is to remain entirely contained. Understood? Rowan inclined his head, voice calm and measured. Understood, sire. The vault remains secure, and access is restricted. The king's eyes lingered on the pedestal for a heartbeat longer before he nodded, signaling both satisfaction and expectation. Rowan exhaled slightly, though tension remained high. The immediate crisis of exposure had been contained, yet the moral and emotional stakes had escalated. The queen consort, upon learning of the discovery, would surely respond, and Rowan understood that he would be caught between duty to the king, protection of palace integrity, and the moral responsibility toward those involved in the vault's secrecy, including Marianne. The palace corridors, usually calm and predictable, now carried the resonance of anticipation, authority, and silent suspense. From the shadow, Rowan observed Marianne, whose hands still clutched the satchel. He offered a reassuring nod, conveying both calm and vigilance. She exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly, yet the awareness of the king's immediate involvement had transformed the discovery from quiet suspense to a charged moral and emotional theater. Every heartbeat, every glance, every subtle motion in the corridor was now infused with significance. Rowan knew that the unfolding drama would not remain confined to the East Wing. It would ripple through the palace, demanding careful navigation, unwavering loyalty, and moral courage. The king straightened, voice carrying the weight of decision. Rowan, ensure the vault is monitored. I want a full report on its contents and security measures within the hour. Nothing is to be moved, touched, or disturbed until the queen consort is present. If there is any attempt to access it prematurely, you are to intervene immediately. Rowan inclined his head, understanding both the responsibility and the gravity of the king's orders. The palace had shifted from routine ceremony to immediate action, and he was at the center of it. As the king departed down the corridor toward the grand hall, Rowan remained in the shadows, vigilant, aware of every detail. The vault, the satchel, Marianne, and the moral responsibility now rested squarely on him. The palace, with its centuries of tradition, grandeur, and secrecy, had become a stage for immediate consequence. Rowan knew instinctively that the queen consort would soon react, that authority, discretion, and loyalty would collide, and that the story of the hidden crown jewel vault was only beginning to unfold. Rowan Hale remained in the shadowed corridor long after the king had departed, the echo of his authoritative footsteps fading but leaving tension in every polished surface. The palace had returned to its quiet morning rhythm, yet nothing felt ordinary. The hidden crown jewel vault, once a whispered legend, had been discovered, and Rowan now carried the weight of both its secrecy and the king's immediate orders. Every instinct in him flared with caution, responsibility, and the awareness that the coming confrontation with the queen consort would demand judgment, courage, and subtlety. Minutes later, a faint rustle announced the queen consort's arrival. Camilla's presence was instantly commanding, even in the hushed corridors of her private wing. Her gown brushed the marble floors with a soft whisper, and the subtle scent of her perfume, jasmine, and sandalwood wafted through the hall. Rowan straightened, hand resting lightly on his baton, posture immaculate. He had seen her authority manifest before, but today it carried heightened stakes. The king had been informed of her hidden vault, and the queen consort would not react quietly. Every step she took radiated tension, control, and barely restrained surprise. "Lieutenant Hale," she said sharply, eyes narrowing, voice measured yet imbued with authority. "I hear there has been a development." Rowan met her gaze calmly. "Sire has been informed of the vault, ma'am. The chamber and its contents remain secure. No unauthorized access has occurred." Camilla's eyes flickered, calculating, a flash of irritation barely concealed beneath her composed exterior. Rowan noted the subtle tightening of her jaw and the slight narrowing of her pupils. She was processing rapidly, weighing potential outcomes and assessing loyalty. Camilla's next words carried both accusation and command. "You should have consulted me first. This is my private collection, my responsibility. Do you understand?" Rowan maintained steady composure. "Yes, ma'am. Under normal circumstances, I would have deferred. Given the king's direct order, I acted to ensure both security and discretion." Her lips pressed into a thin line, the tension in her posture evident. Rowan could see the inner conflict, the blend of authority, pride, and the knowledge that the king's awareness had altered the balance of power in the palace. Marianne stepped lightly into view, still clutching the satchel, wide-eyed and trembling. Rowan placed a protective hand near her elbow, signaling calm. Camilla's gaze swept over the young aide, sharp and assessing. "And you?" she said, voice icy. "What role have you played in this?" Marianne faltered, voice barely audible. I delivered documents to the chamber, ma'am, following your instructions. Rowan intervened gently, guiding her slightly behind him. "Ma'am, she acted under direct orders from you, as instructed. No breach has occurred beyond what was necessary to secure the items." Camilla's eyes flickered with acknowledgement, but Rowan sensed the simmering anger beneath her composed facade. The queen consort approached the pedestal, inspecting the floor seam and the hidden latch with meticulous attention. Her fingers hovered over the concealed panel, her movements deliberate. Rowan observed every subtle shift, the tilt of her head, the narrowing of her eyes, the micro-expressions that betrayed both irritation and calculation. Camilla's authority was absolute within her private wing. Yet, the king's involvement had injected an unfamiliar tension into the dynamic. Rowan felt the moral and professional weight pressing down, knowing that the delicate balance of loyalty, discretion, and secrecy now rested on his ability to maintain order without provoking escalation. "Explain to me," Camilla said finally, voice controlled but edged with steel, "how this discovery occurred." Rowan recounted his observations, from the initial discovery of the seam to the panel's mechanism to Marianne's delivery of the satchel. Every detail was precise, every word measured. He emphasized the preservation of secrecy and security, ensuring that accountability and discretion were clear. Camilla's expression shifted subtly, a faint flash of admiration buried beneath her irritation. She recognized both competence and loyalty, the twin qualities she valued most in her guards. Camilla's tone softened, though the underlying tension remained. "I will handle this with Sire," she said, eyes still on the vault. "But you, Lieutenant, have placed yourself in a difficult position. The king knows, yet the vault must remain undisrupted until I dictate otherwise. Do you understand the responsibility?" Rowan inclined his head. "Yes, ma'am. The vault remains secured. Access is restricted. No one will interfere without your direction." Camilla's lips pressed together, a fleeting acknowledgement of both control and reliance. Rowan sensed her strategic mind weighing options, planning both preservation and negotiation with the king. The palace corridor remained silent, every polished surface reflecting tension. Rowan observed the micro-movements of Camilla's aides as they arrived quietly, summoned perhaps by her subtle instruction. They adjusted drapery, straightened tapestries, and aligned candlesticks. Yet their glances betrayed heightened awareness. They, like Rowan, understood the significance of the king's knowledge and the queen consort's hidden authority. The palace had shifted from ceremonial calm to a stage where secrecy, loyalty, and power collided. Rowan's pulse thrummed in rhythm with the unfolding drama, every breath measured, every movement purposeful. Camilla finally stepped back from the pedestal, placing her hand lightly on the edge. Her gaze swept the corridor, landing on Rowan with a piercing intensity. "Lieutenant, the vault is mine to control. Do not allow anyone to tamper with it. Not until I decide. You understand? Rowan's voice was calm, unwavering. Understood, ma'am. Security and discretion remain absolute. A flicker of acknowledgement crossed her face. Approval buried beneath authority, tempered by the presence of the king's earlier involvement. From beyond the corridor came a faint echo of movement. Rowan tensed, sensing the approach of additional palace staff or aides drawn by the subtle disturbance. Unaware of the delicate balance now in play, Camilla's eyes flickered toward the sound, calculating. Rowan remained poised, hand lightly on his baton, prepared to act if exposure threatened the vault. The palace seemed to hold its breath, as though aware that the next moments would determine both control and consequence. The queen consort turned fully to Rowan, voice quiet but laden with command. Ensure that nothing leaves this wing. No information, no documents, no hint of the vault's existence. The king may know, but the palace must not speculate. Rowan inclined his head. It will be maintained, ma'am. Absolute discretion will be preserved. Camilla's gaze softened briefly, and Rowan sensed a fleeting acknowledgement of trust, tempered by the unspoken tension of the king's immediate awareness. As the queen moved toward her private chambers, the palace corridors seemed to exhale, though the tension lingered. Rowan's pulse gradually steadied, yet he remained acutely aware of his responsibility. The vault was secured, the king had been informed, and Camilla's authority remained intact, but any misstep could unravel the delicate balance. Marianne followed quietly, guided and protected, her earlier fear replaced by cautious understanding of the stakes. Rowan's mind catalogued every detail, every nuance of the morning's events, aware that history had just shifted within the palace walls. For a long moment, the corridor was silent, save for the distant echo of footsteps receding toward Camilla's private wing. Rowan pressed a gloved hand lightly against the pedestal, ensuring its hidden latch remained secure. The vault, once legend, was now tangible, secured, yet alive with possibility. The king's reaction had been immediate, commanding, and decisive, yet the queen consort had asserted her authority, blending caution, pride, and strategy. Rowan felt the weight of both loyalty and moral responsibility settling on him, understanding that this discovery would shape the palace's next hours, days, and perhaps years. The palace seemed to whisper around him, the polished marble floors reflecting sunlight and shadow, the tapestries watching silently, the corridors alive with the resonance of secrecy and consequence. Rowan stepped back, poised, vigilant, aware that his role as protector, observer, and executor of discretion had never carried greater importance. The hidden crown jewel vault remained untouched, its treasures preserved, its significance magnified by the king's immediate knowledge and the queen consort's command. Rowan's eyes flicked to the shadows, aware that the unfolding story was far from over, and that the palace, silent and grand, had entered a new era of intrigue, loyalty, and suspense.